Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome to my book corner. Today we're taking a look at Meat by Dain Cobain. This is the biggest book that I'm reading for the Festival of Fear this month. It comes in at 468 pages. First released in October of 2020. As always, we shall take a look at the story, the characters, the world building, before I give some thoughts on the presentation and my overall feelings at the end. Let's just jump straight into this one. So, this story will be familiar to anyone who has seen or read any sort of zombie or disease outbreak film or book or anything like other media. You have a breakout of some sort within this massive factory farm in the UK, and basically no one knows what's causing it, no one knows how it spread. They get a few little warning signs beforehand, but nothing that they can put the finger on until the entire animal population decide that they are now at the top of the food chain and humans are for lunch. You get a small group of people who just about survive the initial outbreak and sort of hole up almost like a base under siege portion. You have the army coming into quarantine to make sure that whatever this is doesn't spread. There are suggestions as well of this potentially being a supernatural element as well as a natural one. Bits of both going on there. And all this is stuff that you'll have seen in other media in the past. But it acts as a really, really strong framework for the location where this is set, which sort of sets this apart a little bit, which we'll talk more about in world building. But overall, the story itself, whilst not over the original, does act as a really rugged and robust framework for the tale and themes that this is exploring. Characters then, and there's a lot of characters in here. I'm only going to touch on a couple of them. The main character, if you can call him that, is Tom Copeland, who is the vet who's gone to work at this factory farm. And he's actually quite interesting in many regards because he's clearly very good at his job, but some things have occurred in his life and he cannot practice as a normal vet anymore. So he ends up having to take this job and sort of put his morals to one side in a lot of regards, because a vet's job is to make sure animals are cared for and healthy, and this is a factory farm. The aim isn't for them to be healthy, it's to get them through the process. So you've got animals in terrible conditions and being fed in less than ethical ways, and just in general the treatment is appalling. And he's got to put that to one side and just do the job of getting them through. And despite that, it adds a layer to his character, but you still kind of root for him a little bit. He does kind of fade out in the middle of the book before coming back towards the end, however. And a lot of that is due to another two of the characters. The first one is Big Jim, who is the head of security at the facility. Jim is I think he's Glaswegian, he's certainly Scottish. He's written in such a way that you can hear the accent dripping through. And he is very rough and ready, always up for a fight, quite aggressive, foul-mouthed, rules his security team with a iron fist in many regards. In another life, it very much comes across like the stereotypical football hooligan in many regards, the way of some of the things that he does and the way he talks and some of the flashbacks to his youth. And this is somebody who, when he was younger, was certainly no saint, shall we say. And actually probably the character I enjoyed the most in this in many regards. And then the other major character that I want to mention is the CEO, the person running this farm, John MacDonald. And I dare anyone to not think old MacDonald had a farm every time he appears in the book. And he's a bean counter, but he's a bean counter who understands how the farm works properly. To him, everything in the farm is a machine. And he's kind of the first one to pick up that something is slightly off with the animals before anyone else does, in many regards, even though it's something really imperceptible in many ways. They all have interesting sort of character arcs, Copeland in particular, and Big Jim. You've got elements of control here and how people react under pressure. So, for example, MacDonald still ends up kind of in charge after everything goes to hell. And there's some really good interactions here and some interesting little bonds. You do have a number of other characters in here. I'm just going to name the ones that I sort of think are the more important in many regards. You've got Jill MacDonald, who is the niece of the CEO. She's one of the last survivors, very young. I think she's 16 or 18 at the start of this. Very naive in many regards, and that naivety is torn away. You have Lee Keys, who ends up being very much a dissenter in the group later on, as he clashes with the CEO over how they should be doing things and how badly everything's going. You have a guy called Harry York, as you had environmental protesters there as well. Diane Runciman, who came from environmental health. You've got Lieutenant Colonel, I can't read my own writing. You've got the army there as well, so you've got the guy in charge of the army who doesn't quite realise how severe this situation is actually going to end up being. But the most interesting thing about the characters, and this is the cast as a whole in terms of the workers at the factory farm, is how disaffected they are by everything that happens on their day-to-day job. They're working in horrific conditions. The animals are not healthy, they're not well treated, they're in horrific conditions as well, but then they're going on the break and quite happily having bacon and sausage burgers and sandwiches and so on and so forth, just totally unperturbed by what they're eating, the effect that it has on the animals. And that's actually in many ways a damning indictment, but it's also quite true of a lot of industries where people are doing jobs which aren't great, and it ends up just being another Tuesday until everything goes wrong. Character work is really solid. The interplay between the characters is good as well, and really sells tension of this title. I think it's really, really strong in this regard as well. World building is where this one really comes to life. You really get a sense of how horrific the conditions are in this factory farm. There are some liberties taken, which the author does mention at the back of the book. We'll touch on that in presentation, as most factory farms, first of all, tend to be one type of animal, not mixed, just in case of a sort of an outbreak that could become cross-species. It minimises the chance of that. And also, we don't currently have factory farms to this scale in the UK. They tend to be in America. That being said, it's also mentioned that part of the reason that this has sprung up, and it's still a relatively new place, is because of Brexit and the switching away from EU regulations. And so a bit less of the ethical practices are being enforced in many regards. And the way the place is described and the injuries to the animals, it just feels so ramshackle in many regards. So little money is spent on, so you've got like rusting bars, you've got the actual living conditions themselves, how closely packed in the animals are in many regards. You have the smell is something that comes up over and over and over again. It's a smell that you will never get out of your nostrils because it's so horrendous. And all this sort of builds a natural horror to the story as it is before it really kicks off, because this is already a horrific environment. And absolutely, if animals did find a way to band together, they would kind of rebel and turn against the humans, like what happens in here. There is some supernatural elements in here as well, which I'm not going to spoil. And it's not completely clear exactly how that works in many regards, but certainly there anyway. But also you've got the sort of the hysteria, the mass panic. You've got the protesters outside and how militant they become and how militant security becomes keeping them out. You have the approach of environmental health, who are incentivized to pass places like this because they have quotas to hit and bonuses to gain. But overall, the world building is probably the strongest thing in this entire book, and it's clear that there's been a great deal of research that has gone into this, which is going to fetch me to the next one. Presentation here is actually really, really strong for a couple of different reasons. Starting with the actual pacing of the story in general, it's split up into 3 key acts. First one is very much this is the status quo, and you see that slowly breaking down. That then goes into what I would call a base under siege story, where you've got a small group of people holed up with dwindling supplies and no chance of escape, and how they hold up. Before you hit the third act, which is the escape itself, where a handful of people do manage to get out and back out into the world, and then see the actual overall consequence of what has gone on here. Because obviously at that point, they just have a small picture view, and then they get out into the wider world. It's like, oh no. But what really does set this apart is the amount of research that's gone into it. That research is documented at the back of the book. You have interviews with various experts in animal disease, in zombie writing, interestingly enough, in animal conditions and factory farms. There's a lot there which has clearly helped inform the story that's being told, and does sort of help drive home as well at the fact that in many ways this isn't as far-fetched as perhaps you think it is. This sort of factory farm doesn't generally exist. You generally don't have multiple different animals in a factory farm, and the author has said that he has taken some liberties, as you would expect, with some aspects of this to help design a strong narrative. But the conditions of the animals in there here are not anything that isn't already well documented elsewhere, which adds an extra level to the horror of this. And overall, I think the research that's gone on, and the fact that you can see that research yourself to an extent at the end of the book, is a really interesting approach to take with this, and I think reinforces the message very much of the importance of where our food comes from. So my final thoughts on this: I actually really enjoyed this. It'll be a little bit longer to read than it normally would, but then again, it's also the biggest horror book I've read for quite a long time, to be fair. Yeah, I think this is excellent. I think, obviously, if you're not a fan of animals in distress, this isn't going to be a horror book for you, because it is very vivid in its descriptions of the injuries animals suffer, how disease-ridden they are, how they're treated just in general within this factory farm, and is, again, by extension, in factory farms in general. And I really enjoyed this. This goes in a high B tier for me. It's not going to be for everyone, but it's well paced, it's got a solid narrative, decent character work, really exceptionally well researched as well. But that's my thoughts on me. Have you read this? Would you read this? Let me know in the comments below. I'll catch you all next time.